Hello, welcome to another Disney adaptation. Today, we're going to talk about the first Disney movie of all time, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Disney adaptation of Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, in a kingdom, there lived an evil queen who had a magic mirror. Every day, she would ask it who was the most beautiful. The queen feared that someday her stepdaughter Snow White's beauty will surpass her own. So she dressed her in rags and forced her to work as a scullery maid. Snow White shares with her animal friends how she fell in love with a prince. Little does she know, the prince is in love with her too. When the queen's greatest fear finally came true, she sent her huntsman to kill Snow White and bring back her heart. The huntsman approached Snow White, but couldn't bring himself to kill her. He told Snow White to run off into the forest and never come back. In the forest, Snow White told the animals about her situation. The animals took Snow White to a cottage in the forest. Snow White goes inside and saw how messy the cottage was. She and the animals decide to clean the cottage to surprise the people living there. Meanwhile, in the mines, 7 little dwarfs were mining gems. The cottage in the forest belonged to them, and their names were Doc, Happy, Bashful, Dopey, Grumpy, Sneezy, and Sleepy. Snow White fell asleep on the dwarfs' beds. When the dwarfs returned to the cottage, they saw that it had been cleaned and suspected someone came into their home. They thought it was a monster, so they were about to kill it, but saw a beautiful young girl instead. Snow White told the dwarfs about her situation, and they let her stay. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the queen found out that Snow White was still alive and that she had been tricked. The queen decided to take matters into her own hands and disguises herself as an old peddler woman. Meanwhile, back at the cottage, Snow White told the dwarfs a story about herself and how she fell in love with a prince. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the queen poisons an apple and makes it look harmless to give it to Snow White and kill her. The queen goes to the cottage and tells Snow White the apple is a magic wishing apple. Snow White made a wish, took a bite, and fell unconscious from the poison. The dwarfs and animals are worried about Snow White, so they go back to the cottage, and the queen falls off a cliff and dies. The dwarfs put Snow White on a coffin since they thought she was dead. Then, the same prince Snow White fell in love with kisses her and she wakes up, and they lived happily ever after. The end. The fairy tale starts with Snow White's birth story, but the movie starts directly with the evil queen. In the fairy tale, the dwarfs are not named, but in the movie, the dwarfs have distinct names and personalities. In the fairy tale, the queen tries to kill Snow White 3 times with a dress, a comb, and finally the apple, but in the movie, the queen tries to kill Snow White only 1 time with the apple. In the fairy tale, the queen dies by being forced to dance in red-hot iron shoes, but in the movie, the queen dies by falling off a cliff in a storm. In the fairy tale, Snow White wakes up by a piece of the apple being dislodged from her throat, but in the movie, she wakes up by a love's first kiss from the prince. That was the Disney adaptation of Snow White, so if you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe.